Everybody's refreshed, ready to go? Okay, because, ladies and gentlemen, you're going to need that refreshment for Phil McConnell.
I wonder if this microphone's working. Good. We've had quite a challenge. Sometimes authorities don't want certain messages passed, and such is the case today. In fact, the title of my speaking thing right here, I wish I had my glasses, which are in my pocket. In fact, I'm going to take a very short delay because Brian Garish needs to be straightened out. I was supposed to talk about the cult of transformational newspeak, but he already did that. So fortunately, we had 3 more programs, and this is my wife, Denise, who last year was my fiance. And when I do speak now, I hope I honor my wife, my parents, and my Creator. And so Anne, whenever you want to do it, we're going to try real hard to stay on schedule, Ian. And if we don't, then you know what to do. But let's not waste a lot of time, because, by the way, this whole program, which has 44 slides, we will give you there's a PDF presentation where you can get all these and take them home. But basically, I'm talking about pedophilia, which I did not want to talk about. Ian and I said that we had a conversation, and the conversation went like this. Field, what would you like to talk about? And I said, I'd like to eulogize a certain evil person. And he said, that person's not dead yet. And I said, well, it's not May yet, but the person's still alive. So we're going to talk about pedophilia, because that's what Ian said. He said, if you want to talk about anything, it'll be pedophilia, or we won't see you until, hell freezes over. So anyway, the reason I'm motivated to talk about this, and I thank Ian for suggesting it, because I do have a personal relationship to pedophilia, and it's that my sister and Hillary Clinton ran Pizzagate, Pedogate, and the global net-centric pedophile network that controls the governments of most of the supposedly modern nations. I think pedophilia has been around since 4000. And Anne and Matthew, whenever you want to roll them, go ahead. But Matthew 19:4 tells us not to be involved in pedophilia. And Matthew 18:5 says this, if anyone who welcomes these little ones welcome me, and if you cause these little ones to stumble, it would be better if you put a millstone around your neck and hop in the water. So, the elites of your country, the elites of my country, they don't get it. They think they're important. They're not. They're a bunch of phony baloney actors whose time is well over. I'm supposed to do this once in a while. That's me. This says, the entities which run the world for the past 4,000 years have nothing to fear from me, which they don't, but they better watch themselves when it comes to who I work for. And I think most of you know who I work for, and it's not a human. And later today, my wife Denise and I are going to exchange those rings, and those rings are custom made here in the UK, and one of our friends, Lance, arranged that with a jeweler. But the way we, and my wife came up with the ring design, and I applaud her for it, and we're going to put them on here later today in a small little ceremony. This ring right here, I can't read that language, but I know what it says. It says that you can control all the governments of the world if you use pedophilia. And that's what we're living in today. And I'm probably going to offend 1 or 2 Brits, and I hope you forgive me. I'm married to a Brit, so it's not that I'm anti-England or anti-UK. I'm anti-pedophilia, and your government's run by it from head to toe. And so is mine. And we need to quit that. The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil for good is for good men to do nothing. That was Edmund Burke. I don't know what country he was from. Maybe yours, maybe mine. Doesn't matter. The truth, the truth. And the evil force pulling the strings in governments is telling everybody to remain in disbelief. But fortunately, as Brian Garish and Ian probably both said, nobody's buying the mainstream media. In this group of mostly 40 to 70-year-olds, maybe we've cut down 30 to 40%. I've cut down 100% in my being influenced by the media. But the younger people are even more rock solid against the media. And, God bless the young people, because they're going to inherit this mess if we don't get this pedophilia handled. Every once in a while, Ian, I'll make sure Ann tells me if I'm going too fast or too slow, but I think we're ready to go to the next slide. This is really complex, and I want to give credit right now to a man who's very humble and doesn't want credit, but there's a lot of people in this room who are experts at something, and the man who put this together is an expert at visual imagery. Right there, HSBC, that's one of the big grips on our collective governments, because they've been running a drug network for 300 years plus, and they use those drug profits to control people and governments, and they're trying real hard to control my government, meaning the U.S., and your government, I think, is still in their grip, and this guy didn't help. I don't know how many are familiar with Serco. It's the biggest corporation you've never heard of. Could I just get a show of hands of anybody who's even heard of Serco? Oh, 60%. Good. I can skip that then. White's Club Spread Betting, that's a bunch of, they call themselves elitist, and I don't have a good vocabulary, so I don't know what elite means, but I'm guessing it means excrement, because every elitist I've ever seen looks like excrement. Most of these names up here are British. This one right here is Able Danger. That's a group that I work with, and we're all volunteers. We're from many nations. We love people. We hate oppression. We don't appreciate our governments trying to control every facet of our life, and we certainly don't appreciate the fact they're using pedophilia to do that, which they certainly are. Okay, there's either Canada or England. There's England. There's England. There's England. There's England. Anybody know Jimmy Savile? Yeah, why hasn't somebody in your government come clean on that? Maybe because they're part of it? I don't know. But I certainly think they are. And then we go back to the British Empire, which is crumbling. And the British Empire was, and correct me if I'm wrong, Ian, or anybody else, if I say something that's offensive or wrong, just correct me. That's how I learn. You guys have used drugs for 300 plus years to control the world. And I've never taken a drug, but I don't necessarily want to be controlled. I was created as a free person, and I'd like to live in peace. And I'd like for everyone around the world to live in peace, and it can be done. But we got to get rid of guys like that, who everyone thinks he's a Nazi from Austria. And actually, he was working for the British over there. And when I say that, it was the British, and specifically Commander Harold Goulding, that got Hitler out of Berlin right before the Russians showed up. And they also got Martin Bormann, his treasury guy. They got Bormann over here to England, where he lived anonymously until he died of natural causes in 1959. But did your colleges or schools teach you that? I didn't think so. This is me, and some people think I have a lot of nerve. I don't have any nerve. I've been called to do this, and I didn't get called to expose pedophilia, but I got called to expose evil, and I'll do that till the day I die, and I'm not afraid of dying. We're all going to die, and I hope you all know that. I don't want to die anytime soon because of the picture of the lady on the very first slide. But let's go back. There's Underground. That's you guys. You had something on 7/7 that was complete fake, and they were very sloppy. That goes back to this company because they made a lot of mistakes. But here's a U.S. group. They do false flags. DMORT means portable morgues. But the portable morgues always show up at the scene of the crisis the day before the crisis. So what does that tell you? Royal Wings, okay, there's people. This is Telford. That's Telford. And the significance of Telford is I've been occasionally asked to come over here and speak in England, and I love to do it because I love the people, I love the country, and believe it or not, I like the food. But I've been following around trying to grab onto Brian Garish's coattails, and I want to point out that he grabbed my tie, and he didn't return it yet. But anyway, I think we can go to the next slide whenever the kids are ready. I won't waste a lot of time. We got started late, so I'll try to catch up a little. Power is an aphrodisiac. Now, can anybody picture Henry Kissinger? Would anybody argue with me that he looks like a bowling ball with legs? Yeah, I don't know who he's loyal to, but he's not loyal to the United States. He's not loyal to the United Kingdom. He's not loyal to people, and he's certainly not loyal to children. And there's a lot of parents in here, and even if there weren't, every one of you was a kid once. And somehow you got to this position in your life without being run to death, and I'm going to say that again, run to death or murdered, sacrificed. So we'll cover that later. He thinks that highly political and powerful pedophiles become masters of blackmail. Yeah, they sort of have to, because they got to keep covering up their crimes. And I probably will stun some people when I say that the last U.S. election, we had a woman running against a guy with hair. And you guys think there was an election. I don't. I'm not going to argue this. We don't have time. I think he was installed by the military, and I think he was installed by the military with white hats who don't want endless war for bankers, for the Vatican Jesuits, and for the City of London bankers. And okay, there's some people in, I don't have any background in pedophilia either than there's the most dangerous pedophile in America that I know, other than the man, and I'll tell you privately, I don't think Ian wants me to mention the guy that I think is more evil than my sister, so I won't. But that's my sister. Her name is Christine Marcy. She's a jack of everything and a master of none, whatever that means. But she's been in the U.S. bureaucracy and then after 30 years in the official government trying to commit treason using pedophilia as a control mechanism over the United States government. Then she went in to become a contractor. And contractors are people that are paid a lot to continue doing what they used to do when they were in official office, because it's sort of like being a judge or a CIA agent. Once you're in, and you never get out. There was a movie in 1987, I think, with Kevin Costner. It was called No Way Out. There's one way out. I don't want to preach to people, but these people need to get on their knees and pray their way out of it. Otherwise, the future's not good. This is the third most evil person I know of. And that person right there knows my name, and she doesn't like me. But do you see that I'm alive? And I'm not afraid of her. Her name's Hillary Rodham Clinton. She's a female pedophile. She's one of the most offensive people I've ever met. And I'm not political. I'll hammer a Republican right now just to show you I'm not political. I personally filed treason charges on John McCain on the 6th of April of 2008, and that's why he was pulled off the ticket with what's his name? Who was it? Oh, John McCain was the guy, yes. And Tim Pawlenty, when I filed treason charges on McCain, Tim Pawlenty was the governor of my state. So he's running for vice president. I deliver treason charges, and he goes, oops, there's a spanner in the works. So then here's a book about female pedophilia, and I'm not expert on it, so don't ask me, but there's the book. Anybody recognize this woman? I hope not. Good. Janet Napolitan, all these women, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, question mark, big question mark, multiple question marks. But these women that I just hit, 5 of them, 2 of them are the same. That one and that one are the same. But they're all radical lesbians who hate men, hate families, hate their country, and they think that they're above the law, and they are right now, but they're not above the big law, and they will be dealt with in a time not of my choosing. My sister helped goof up the United States Department of Justice, and if anybody's ever watched our Department of Justice in action, you can see that it's clearly out of whack. And I'd say yours is out of whack too. But I don't want to, since I'm here as a guest of the Queen, I don't want to be overly offensive. I just want to be offensive enough so they got my name right. And power is an aphrodisiac, Henry Kissinger. Well, I would see where he would need an aphrodisiac, because if any woman that's a heterosexual saw him coming, they'd run. And they wouldn't have to run fast because he can't ambulate very quick in an erect manner. Narcissistic pedophiles seek power for protection. Well, here's a good name, and I'll get back to it later. Dennis Hastert. Is there anybody here in England that knows that name, Dennis Hastert? Good. Would you think he played a big part in 9/11? Aha, gotcha. He did, and I'll get to it later. Dennis Hastert is a male homosexual that was a wrestling coach in Chicago, and because he was totally controllable, because they knew he was a pedophile, they made him Speaker of the House, which is third in succession. So in today's act, it's all an act, Trump's #1, Pence is #2, and Paul Ryan, who's a nobody from Wisconsin, where I live, he's #3. But they put Speaker of the House, they control these guys with pedophilia or some other bizarre human failing. And I'm not judging lifestyles or anything like that, but the guys that show up as Speaker of the House, they're 100% controllable, because if the people that, and I don't know for sure who runs the United States, it's not the United States, it may be a consortium of the Crown agents, the Crown, the Jesuit Order of the Vatican, which is military intelligence and has nothing to do with Christianity. But these names, Hastert, Kissinger, George H.W. Bush, foot stomper, Bill Clinton, Mao Zedong, Gandhi, and Christopher Columbus. Now, there's a couple of allegedlys in there, but that's only because whoever might have made this up, whether it's me or someone else, would not like to be sued here because I don't know if your attorneys, barristers are trustworthy. And it's what? Who's not going to sue me? Oh, no, yeah, he's dead, and there's somebody else in that list I wish was, but that's not. I'm going to take the time to read this. Ewan Cameron is the great-great-grandfather of the Bullingdon Club, former White Club member and Prime Minister past of the UK. He was a banker who rose to be London head of the HSBC, to launder opium profits, and then it goes on to talk about HSBC and Royal Bank of Scotland, the charitable foundation run by Hillary Clinton and her family, which Abel Danger has done a very good job of destroying, and we're not finished, but she will be finished, as well. Her foundation's been basically shut down. They received $81 million from wealthy international donors who were clients of HSBC's controversial Swiss bank, blah, 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 blah. HSBC is Serco's, we've heard that before, the biggest company you've never heard of. It runs the world. It runs the United States Patent Office, the United States military, the United States government. Serco runs the United States. And speaking as a 67-year-old American, and I'm speaking for 330 other Americans, most of whom are asleep, but we don't want Serco running our country, because Serco would cause us to go to war for a bunch of phony baloney bankers, and we've had enough war, and I hope your squatties have had enough too. I'm sick of it. No offense to Serco, of course. There, Black Hand, you'll want to Google that later. They have ways of tracking assets, human assets and other assets, through their jetways in 81 countries. They have a student loan program at Oxford Aviation Training, which I've actually been there. I was, after I quit working for a US company because I was being forced to fly illegally modified airplanes, I got asked to go over to a Muslim nation, and I did. And then when I was at the Muslim nation, I was sent to Oxford about a year and a half, in 2009, because another Muslim nation was trying to hire me to fly airplanes, and I was ready to go. But I told him, I said, you know, I can fly one airplane at a time and provide for the safety of 100 to 300 people, but I can straighten your airline out so you don't have any more of these accidents, because the accidents in the airline industry are not accidents at all. And of course, that was the end of my interview with the other airline, because they were scared to death of what I was saying, because they didn't understand it. Here's HSBC again. By the way, if we went through this a little bit longer, we don't have time because we're late, but my sister, whose name is Christine Marcy, she was at one point highly ranked in the Department of Justice. In 1984, she and Eric Holder. Has anybody in this room ever heard of the half-white, half-black Eric Holder, who was at the Department of Justice? Yeah. Oh, good. Yeah, he's not a good guy. Neither is my sister, but they came up with this DOJ asset forfeiture fund where they set up crime and then they solve the crime and then they tell you you owe them a lot of money. But they also take these penalties like that one right there, $1.9 billion. It goes right in my sister's hip pocket or purse, depending if she's wearing men's pants or something more feminine. And then they use that, it's like a coffee fund where they create more crimes. And some of the crimes that these people, meaning the Department of Justice of the United States of America and the lesbians, and I'm not homophobic, it's just that lesbians and male homosexuals are easier to extort and entrap simply because, not because of their nature, it's because of their acts and because of cameras they don't know about. And so in my sister's case, when she was 19, she probably got videotaped doing something my dead parents wouldn't be proud of, and I'm not proud of either. And so my parents are gone, and now it's down to me and my sister. One of us is going to live, and one of us is going to die. So heads up, flip a coin. HSBC, we've done enough about that. They go around here and trapping people. Black Hand, you'll have to Google that. Pato Ring inside number 10. I wonder what year they're talking about. Are they talking about Thatcher, Heath, Cameron, Blair? Who's the new guy? Oh, never mind, it's not a guy, and that was unintentional. I know who it is. It's Theresa May. But, you know, the beat goes on, and the rape and the pedophile behavior goes on. Ann, how are we doing on time? Good. Well, speed me up or slow me down, but there is not a very nice person. A lot of you in England know that in 1888 there were the Whitechapel murders that were called Jack the Ripper. Am I right? Yeah, well, it wasn't Jack the Ripper, I don't think. I think it was Jill the Ripper. And Jill is an American named Jane Addams, and once again, she's a radical lesbian, and I'm not anti-lesbian. I have, my wife's here, and she knows in my small community of 600, there's a couple lesbians that are very friendly to me. I have old cars, and I only had one old car break down, and guess who stopped to help me? A lesbian. I'm not anti-lesbian. I'm anti-pedophilia. I'm anti-treason. I'm anti-trying to micromanage every minute of our life right up until death, and then they try to schedule our death, too. Which means I hope I remember to say something about your hacking at NHS, but I may not have time. Children's villages. Okay, my sister and Hillary and the rest of these people that are abusing children, and what they're doing with these orphanages, and this goes to war too. When they have wars or they create false things like AIDS, they're creating orphans. Now, what do you think they're creating the orphans for? Any guesses? Okay, I'll tell you, since nobody guessed. Pedophile use and then human organ harvesting. And it's very, very profitable, except for whoever's body it is that they kill. And so now my sister's gone from being a pedophile to a murderer. She's probably never murdered anybody. I know I never have, but she's enabling murderers, and I'm exposing murderers. And that's where the family breaks down. So that I don't continually pick on UK, let's pick on a couple of Americans. This is a headline from June of 1989, and it says, homosexual prostitution inquiry ensnares VIPs with Reagan and Bush. Now I'm going to say something, hang on tight, Ian. I'm going to say something that nobody may agree with. I may be proven wrong, but I truly believe it's absolutely correct. Bush was the vice president. They were installed on the 20th of January of 1981. On the 30th of March of 1981, anybody remember Reagan getting shot? Who do you think shot him? Okay, never mind, I'll tell you. The CIA, and they shot him for the benefit of G.H.W. Bush. G.H.W. Bush, with his CIA background and his Nazi background, wanted to be in charge of America. And so from the 30th of March of 1981, when he went from being whatever he tried to act like he was, but the act was very unconvincing, he actually became the president of the United States of America, even though he's only the vice president. That shot in the leg with an ice bullet. Anybody heard of ice bullet before? The beauty of an ice bullet is there's no evidence. It gets into 98.6 and it goes away. They took a pot shot at him to tell him you're no longer in charge. G.H.W. Bush ran the country from that day, March 30th of 1981, until the 20th of January of 2017. How did he do that? Well, first of all, he usurped Reagan. Then he got himself elected. Then he got one of his friends in the drug business, Bill Clinton. I don't want to keep asking questions because we ought to stay on schedule. Bill Clinton's real last name is Rockefeller. And if you didn't know that before, welcome to the AV8. You're going to learn a lot. Bill Clinton put in 8 years. Then they put in G.W. Bush Jr., or whatever, the junior Bush, whose name was G.W. Bush. And he ran it for his daddy for 8 years. Let's stop right there. Who was in the White House the morning of 9/11? Who spent the night in the White House the evening before 9/11? I see. Who? The elder George Bush was in the White House, and the young George Bush was reading a goat story upside down. And that sounds critical. It could be that he smelled a rat, because when you turn something upside down in maritime law, it means extremis. It means if I held up something upside down right now, most of you guys would go, that poor Yank, he's holding it upside down. No, I'm asking for help. And only the people that know what upside down means would come help me. Father Flanagan, you guys probably have never heard of that, but Father Flanagan ran Boys Town. Okay, the connection between Boys Town and orphanage in Nebraska, and that is when the guy I mentioned, who ran the country from '81 until 2017, he had a direct pipeline from Boys Town is a small incorporated village in Nebraska. The young adolescent males were taken from there to Offutt Air Force Base. From Offutt Air Force Base, the United States Air Force flew them to Andrews Air Force Base outside Washington, D.C. And just because I like the Clintons so little, let me tell you, it's right near Clinton, Maryland. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. And the facts are the facts, and it's too bad the schools don't teach them. But this is where all the little boys that came up here to entertain G.H.W. Bush and the rest of the homosexual pedophiles in our government at that time, which if you would have told me in 1989 our government was infested with pedophiles, I'd say, well, what's a pedophile? Because I was so naive back then. But I'm catching up as quickly as I can. We don't need to talk about that guy. He's not worthy of our breath. Here's the guy. In fact, I'll get out of the way. Dennis Hastert. I'll put a green dot on his forehead, and too bad it couldn't be something else. That guy was the Speaker of the House. He's a pedophile. He did end up going to jail, but his real position in history is on 9/11. He was supposed to take over because there were plans to get rid of Dick Cheney at Raven Underground Continuation of Government building, which is on the Maryland-Pennsylvania border. And if this guy was going to get in, they had to take care of George W. Bush, too. And if anybody in this room has followed 9/11, there was a radio call when Air Force One was between Offutt Air Force Base and Andrews Air Force Base. Somebody came up on the radio and said, "Angel is next." Has anyone heard that? Not many. But what Angel's the call sign for Air Force One when Air Force One has the president on board. And when they said Angel is next, they were talking about World Trade One, World Trade Two, Pentagon, and Angel's next. So the plan was, and the plan got foisted by, thwarted, pardon my English, I'm not English, but the plan for 9/11 sort of got interrupted with a 41-minute imputed delay. United 93 didn't get airborne, and if it had, we'd be living in a different world, so thank God that the fourth airplane. Thank you very much for keeping me on schedule. Slavery and sex slavery pre-civilization. I'm not an expert or an academic, and I'm very happy I'm not an academic because they're not experts on anything. They're very expert at protecting their retirements, however. One of the most useless groups of 9/11 truthers in America is the Scholars for 9/11 Truth. Thank you for that nod, Ian. They've got a huge, in fact, they've got one of the largest retirement funds in the United States of America, and that fund would probably go right to zero if these guys had to face the truth, so they're compelled to lie and lie continuously about what happened on 9/11. Enough about 9/11. Sexual slavery and sodomy. I think you can read about that in Genesis 19, but we've had pedophilia going back to 4000 BC. I'm going to skip right up to the time of Sodom and Gomorrah. I'm going to skip from there to 1302. Some people here who read a lot, and I'm not one who reads a lot because it's hard on my eyes, but in 1302 there was a document written called the Papal Bull. And what it said in the Papal Bull, and I don't know if it was the white pope, the black pope, the gray pope, the pope's nose, whoever the pope was that spoke in the Papal Bull of 1302 said, "I'm in charge of all the world and I'm in charge of all the people." Well, he's leaving someone else out, and I'll just leave it for that. Child slaves are the easiest to capture, control, violate, exploit, and I would say train. And the reason it says best taken close to puberty is so the people that like to hunt children in England, in Belgium, in Europe, in the US, I think, I'm not sure, but I would guess so, because what you guys, and no offense, I don't ever want to offend any English person, but I take great delight in offending your government. I don't know where humans come off thinking it's okay to get maybe 6 to 10, 10-year-old to 16-year-old boys and girls, take all their clothes off so they're naked, and then run them around the woods hunting them. And then what that does is when your adrenal glands are producing adrenaline and you're hyperventilating because you're scared to death, it super oxygenates your blood. And then these evil cretins from all of our countries, they kill the children. It's called serial ritual assassinations, killings, whatever. They kill them. They take great delight in that. Then they, it doesn't matter how they harvest their blood. I've heard several suggestions. But then they ingest the blood, the humans that killed the kids. They think that that's going to buy them youth. No, that's going to buy them eternity in hell. Thank you very much. Real briefly, you guys have, I don't know where this is, but I know the era it was done. But anybody seen the architecture on the BBC headquarter building? Okay, that's the end of that discussion. If you've seen it once, you'll never forget. So what is it with the BBC and little boys? I can't pronounce this right, Ian, and so apologize for me if I offend anyone. I can't pronounce buggering, but I think BBC means Boy Buggering Club. And until Greg Dyke, nice name, huh? Greg Dyke was in charge around the time of 2001, 9/11, and he got unceremoniously removed. And I don't know if it's the only reason he got removed, but Greg Dyke was in charge of BBC. And at the time of 9/11, here's a building, and a lady named Jane Stanley was reporting the news. And now I get reports that the Barnum-Solomon building, building number 7, has been destroyed, except for one thing. The building's there for another 20 minutes. So that's the end of Greg Dyke. And I don't know where Jane Stanley is, but she's probably not held as an honest journalist any longer. And I'm ready to go on. This is just debauchery. And even though some of us would think it'd be fun to engage in debauchery, I know all sorts of country music songs that suggest that, but there's a price to be paid, and it's called your conscience. And so I'd steer clear of that. You know, I have steered clear of it, and I'd recommend most of us continue to try. Slavery, spelt wrong, and sex slavery underpin all civilization economies. Exploitation of energy and work, blah, 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 slaves has been the success for 6,000 years. And if you do the math, that's going back to 4,000 BC. This did not diminish the predilection of the powerful across civilizations, meaning for all history to continue this sport of kings. Okay, I've got a problem with that too, and I'm going to offend some people here, but I don't get queens and kings. I don't care if they're English, Belgium, Netherlands, Spain, which reminds me, speaking of Spain, you guys have a couple of princes, Harry and what's his name? And that brings us to King Carlos, but we'll leave that for another day. But the more these people dig into this, these sins against everything, I don't make up the sins, but I don't even control the timing. Let's see what this says. 1.2 million child sex slaves worldwide. Slavery is real, spread across by sharing, spread awareness, please do. And if anybody wants this slide presentation, I can get you, it's on the internet right now. It's been out since Wednesday, and I can get you the link, and you can look at it at home and share it with the world. I want to point out this little name down here, Kathy O'Brien. That links to Hillary Clinton. Kathy O'Brien had a part of her genitalia that was mutilated, and Hillary really liked that. I hope Hillary gets a copy of this, because Hillary, you're not fooling anyone, and you and my sister, Christine Marcy, probably need to remove yourselves. And a bright note, I understand that today in the United States of America, there's 23 to 27 high-profile prison cells being readied for some of these arrests that are coming. And whether you, I'm not political, and whether you love or hate Trump, just keep in mind he's an actor, and it's a temporary act. He won't be there forever. But he's been put in position to start the draining of the swamp, and he's doing a good job of getting started, and I hope he continues until completion. And if he's got 23 or 27 cells ready for these people, one of course would be for Hillary, but my sister should certainly be in there too. And so, not to be unkind to my sister, even though she's urinating on the graves of my parents, the foundations of my country, and my background. Enough about my parents, my sister, and my background. But anyway, Hillary needs to go, my sister needs to go, and I hope they go hand in hand and get in the same cell so they can entertain each other, whatever that means. Absolute civilization pyramid hierarchy corrupts absolutely, attracting or creating pedophiles, sociopaths, and psychopaths. I gotta be really honest right in front of everybody. I could not define sociopath, I could not define psychopath. But I wasn't put in this position to give an English lesson. I was put in this position to expose evil, so let's go. Pedophiles historically have had the most power in history protected by law. Gee, I wonder why that is. Well, in the United States, 30 to 40% of our judges are pedophiles. So when you get charged with a pedophile crime, who's going to judge you? Well, you got a pretty good chance it's going to be another pedophile. Most recent example, because I like to show that there is progress being made, the campaign manager for Donald Trump in Kentucky was just charged by Donald Trump as being a pedophile, and if he's not incarcerated now, he soon will be. So they are intending to drain the swamp, but for most of us in the room, they're not draining it fast enough. But be patient, we're not in charge, they are, and the right people are in position, and the swamp's going to get drained, I believe. If not, if I ever come back again, you can all point and say, that's the guy that didn't know what he was talking about. Right here we have that guy, and he's married to this one who has a dolphin on her right ankle, I think. Not that it matters. Here we get this guy again, and let's talk. Oh, I love this. See, I don't speak English, so if I say known knobs, you can excuse me because they say, poor Yankee doesn't know what a knob is. Yeah, I don't know what a wanker, tosser, or shirt lifter either is either. But There's a wanker, there's a tosser, there's a shirt lifter, there's a shirt lifter, there's a shirt lifter, there's a shirt lifter. And then notice he's smelling the flowers, except it's opium, it's heroin. And that's why your country and mine, our young men and women have gone into hell, not on a heavenly cause, but to support drugs. And I've been to Kew Gardens, and Kew Gardens is a lovely place. Too bad it was established to do some unlovely things like that right there. Dope, and then these dopes, which, no offense, I'm not, well, wait a minute, I am going to offend one guy, that one. He and I went to the same high school, Punahou School in Hawaii, and by the way, if anybody comes to the marriage ceremony tonight, my wife and I are going to be wearing Punahou Hawaiian garb. And there's more to that story. But that guy went to Punahou, got out of school in 1979. When he was at Punahou, where I went to school, his name was Barry Swatero, Indonesian Muslim. My name was Field McConnell, U.S. Christian. I was U.S., I was Field McConnell, I wasn't a Christian, but I was a Christian by default. And our nation, the United States of America, is thought of as a Christian nation. No, it's not. It was created by Christians from England who were trying to get away, back to the real life, the Greek life elitists. But anyway, America was created by English people who wanted to get away from the Pope and the King. And we're not away from them yet, sadly. Greek life elitist prep school, we all know where this is going. It's going to Oxford, Eton, Bullingdon. Many rising stars of rich families. Can't we have rising stars from humble families? We used to be able to. Couldn't Ian Crane be a rising star, or Brian Garish? Or some of these ladies, the lady that was the wife of Lee Harvey Oswald, notice how whenever they create a patsy, they give him 3 names. Lee Harvey Oswald. The guy who shot John Lennon, supposedly, 3 names. The guy who shot Reagan, supposedly, 3 names. I only have 2 names, so I'm not shooting anybody. Anyway, I don't care about rising stars and rich families. If you've been given a lot, then much is expected from you. You should give back. But that's not the way of... Well, the Queen owns, I think, 1/6 of the surface of the world. She's not giving back. Well, maybe she will, but she's not going to do it willingly. What a bunch of losers. I don't want to look at it. Next slide, please. They're such pompous asses. The 4 crimes of pedophilia, real quickly. Violation of innocence. Well, that right there is abominable. Can't little girls grow up to be young ladies? Can't little boys, be left alone? They'll find their way to bad things on their own, but let's not show them how. These people are really... I'm glad you asked me to talk about pedophilia. So when I told you I didn't want to do it, I retract that. Somebody's got to do it. In this case, it's me. There's a differentiation between voluntary pedophilia, because it may cross more minds than want to admit it. But there's a difference between crossing your mind. In fact, I had a pastor once tell me, I was talking about heterosexual things, and he said there's a difference between having a bird land in your head and having the same bird build a nest in your hair. And so when these inappropriate thoughts cross any mind, and they surely do, whether you admit it or not, hopefully there's people here who've never had a thought like that, and I wish I was you. But these thoughts come and go, but when you act on those thoughts, that's where the problem goes. Right now in the United States, we have a really fat guy that looks like Kissinger. He's the governor of New Jersey. His name's Chris Christie, and he's a homosexual. And he thinks it's okay for 65-year-old male pedophiles to marry 8-year-old girls. And here's why it's okay. Because we don't want to offend his religious beliefs. His 65-year-old pedophile, you're worried about his? Why don't you worry about the little girl's religious beliefs? Okay, and then my critics would say, little girls and boys can't have religious beliefs. I'd say, well, guess what then? Then they're covered by God. So when you're messing with them, you're not messing with them, although I question where their parents are, but you're messing with somebody a lot more powerful than a fat roly-poly guy named Kissinger or Christie. Anybody heard of Hull House? And I sort of doubt it, but it was in Chicago. Okay, good. Nobody's heard of it. You're going to hear of it now. And you'll hear me say very little things that are considered egotistical or like seeking attention. But Abel Danger shut this down because this house was created back in the 1880s, I believe, if you read the history. And it was supposedly, yeah, there we go, Jane Addams. Remember the Jill the Ripper? That's her. And she created this place in Chicago supposedly for children. You guys here, when you're abusing children, you call them care homes. Yeah, I think a better idea is don't care homes. What's the care home in Ireland that had 800 skeletons in a septic tank? Yeah, and then you got all these little guest houses like Elm Guest House. Well, it should be guest house, like guess how long you're going to be unpenetrated. It's not going to be after dinner. So, you know, I'm sickened by what, and once again, I love England. I'm married to an English lady. I love her too. And I love life. But I'd give up my life in a heartbeat if I could protect one child from being ravaged by these monsters, male and female. Thank you very much from my heart. Ritualistic pedophilia is a likely component in many sex slave soldier militaries and sex slave brothels of civilization cultures. Let's put this right on the United States this time and leave England out of it. In my country, we've got homosexual pedophile men in the United States Marine Corps who killed a friend of mine. They murdered him. And because Ian didn't want me to eulogize somebody, I'll save that for another day or out in the hall. But there was a colonel in the Marine Corps whose name was James E. Sabo, S-A-B-O-W. No one here has ever heard of him. He was murdered on the 22nd of January of 1991 because the following day, and I know you were over in Iraq around this time, I think, or Kuwait, Ian. Well, we started a war over there somewhere around January 22 of 1991. Well, on the evening of January 21, 1991, the word went from El Toro Marine Base, where I was at, and where this colonel that got murdered, bludgeoned to death brutally by our own people, homosexual pedophiles dressed in Marine Corps uniforms, and CIA agents. And how do you think I'm going to be received when I get back to the U.S. after this being put on tape? And I want to thank Ian from the bottom of my heart for letting me put this on tape, because it needs to get out. But when they brutally killed James E. Sabo, they made a big mistake. I was in a recruiting magazine with him. He and I were side by side on opposite pages, and he was a wonderful Marine, and I was a nobody, and yet they killed my brother. And I don't care if my brother's English, Rwandan, North Korean. Oh, look at this guy. We're going to go right up to, you kill my brother and you're going to get it. This guy was a king, and he was King Leon. I can't pronounce it. Can anybody? Yeah, good. I'm glad you guys are educated, because I went to Punahou with what's his name. But this guy was a fierce warrior, and the history of him, and I'm sure everyone, not everyone, but most people in this room would, you guys, I think in England, back when you had education, and I say that respectfully because you used to have good education here. A lot of Americans came over here thinking if they could be a Rhodes Scholar, they'd be something more than a pedophile, which some of them were. It was Rhodes, Cecil Rhodes was a great guy, but this guy might have been greater, because when Sparta, which I think is part of Greece, when they were being attacked by some people, which I think were Persians, anybody know if I'm right? Thank you, because I honestly was not sure I was right. Anyway, let's say that over here, there's 300,000 Persians, and they send an email to Leonidas, and they said, we're going to come over and we're going to kill you. To speed this story up, well, look at that, he's already gone. To speed it up, he said, Molan Labe. Anybody know what that means? It means come and get it, because the Persians said, you can lay down your weapons and you won't get hurt. And he said, come and get it. And that's what I'm saying to the United States government right now, is if you don't like my mouth, come and get it. Okay, let's go back to this. Modern psychology and psychiatry at Tavistock. Okay, anybody remember the Beatles? Okay, anybody know where the Beatles came from? Yeah, Americans don't know that. I love the Beatles. I really did, and I really do. But John Lennon, I think, was killed because he was about ready to spill the beans on this, about who put him in business and why. And the people that put him in business are well-known entities around here. And why was to poison the youth of America and destroy our moral fabric. And I can speak to this, because whatever moral fabric I have today is a different bolt of cloth than what I had back in 1965, 66, when the Beatles said, no reply. Oh, I love that song. But anyway, there's things I would never do, even though I wanted to, in 1965 or 66, because most of us still had moral fabric. Well, when the Beatles came around, and then U.S. groups like Jefferson Starship and Mamas and the Papas, pretty soon our moral fabric was ripped and torn, and we were no longer moral. And men, yeah, I hate to say this, young men no longer, I can't say it. We were no respectful of females, and I really, really don't like the Tavistock Institute for that, and the Beatles didn't either. You know, they were victimized It's not the Beatles wanted to destroy American moral fabric, and when they started to realize what they were doing, just like Michael Jackson and Elvis Presley, that's the end of the act, and they kill them. And if anybody wants to talk about that later, help yourself. Here we go. This is one I'll spend time on. British Psychiatry from Eugenics to Assassination. That name, I'm not familiar. That's a magazine you can look up. But a behavior control research project was begun in the 50s, coordinated by British Psychological Warfare Unit called Tavistock Institute. The Masons, they sure raise their ugly heads a lot. How about the CIA? Everyone in the room thinks it's, I think you think it's the US, don't you, the CIA? Anybody guess another country? It's the UK that runs the CIA, and their lapdog is George H.W. Bush. And George H.W. Bush is on the headquarters building of the CIA, and so you can put 2 and 2 together and figure out that he's not good for America. MK Ultra. Remember the slide where I said some young lady named Kathy O'Brien had a part of her body mutilated? Well, there you go. She was a MK Ultra slave. They became slaves by getting brainwashed, drugs, hypnosis, electroshock, and other tortures. Some people in here believe in God, some people don't. What I do is some people think is dangerous, and I don't. But I have prayed that whether I get killed or whether I live, I'd prefer not to be tortured. And I've even been specific. I'd really like a heart attack if somebody comes at me with a machete, because I'm too fat and chubby to run. Which reminds me, well, let me back out of that. Before I leave, I've got a gift for you, Ian. Forget about what reminded me. Actually, his belt is the same size as mine, 38. We'll see later if it fits. But I gave him a belt, and it's not me. It's none of what I do is about me, but we have belt. Thank you very much. We'll skip over some of the pedophiles. Pedophiles have low self-esteem. Well, maybe they should. And immature egos, well, maybe they are immature. Pedophiles are often victims of pedophilia. So when you do, in fact, now we're getting into intergenerational pedophilia, which involves families. And I personally was in a jury box, and this is why I'm happy to talk about this, even though it seems like I'm jumping all over the place, which I am. On the 21st of August of 2014, I'm sitting right here in the jury box with 11 more people. The judge, that guy over there, he looks at us 12, and he says, before I let the alternative jurors go, do any of you 12 people have a personal relationship with pedophilia? And I said, Judge, not Your Honor. I go, I do, Judge. And he goes, he looks on his cheat sheet, you know, because they're not too smart. They're actors too. And so he looks on his cheat sheet. He sees my name, McConnell. He says, Mr. McConnell, you have a personal relationship with pedophilia? And I says, yes, Judge, I do. My sister runs the largest net-centric pedophile network in the world. I'm not making this up. I see that, and that's a real beauty. Let me get started. But the judge says, he put his hands on his ears. He said, too much information. You're excused. I didn't crack a smile. I knew I'd just beaten a judge. And I didn't want to be in there anyway. Those places are filled with evil. In America, they've got gold fringe flags in the courtroom. What does that mean? It means they're under Admiralty law, maritime law, and they're working for the crown. Well, kiss my crown. I'm not working for you guys. Con Air, my sister started it. It stands for Convict Airlines. There was a movie right there with what's his name. That's a C-123K provider, but my sister ran Con Air, and I'm not certain, but on 9/11, the only airplanes that were allowed to move were U.S. government military airplanes, and the airplane that took the bin Laden family out of the U.S. Now, I've heard it was a private 727. I wouldn't rule out Con Air, because Con Air, and I know this, once again, because of my familiar relationship, I put my sister in touch with people at Northwest Airlines who would give her used airplanes for Con Air. Okay, what about this? Yeah, my sister in 1984 got together with a bunch of radical lesbian traitors. I don't care about the radical. I don't care about the lesbians. I care about the traitors. And what they were trying to do is destroy the Department of Justice, and they did. And right now, the Department of Justice is making a comeback under Attorney General Sessions, but he's got a long way to go. The Cray twins, even when they got put in jail for life or whatever it was, they were still running a mob here, and their mob had a lot to do with the United States Frank Sinatra is one person they dealt with, and there's many, many others. Who's this guy? Okay, his name, does anybody recognize Colonel Russell Williams? Not many. Oh, get a load of this. That's his wife, Mary Elizabeth Harriman. I've been told by a judge named Jennifer McKinnon in Canada never to mention Mary Elizabeth Harriman, so I never do. But this guy right here, he used to fly the Queen around. When the Queen would come to Canada, Colonel Russell Williams would fly her around. Well, guess what he's known for? 82 fetish break-ins. I've never looked under a lady's skirt, but they have some type of, is it called knickers? Yeah, they've got something on there. I don't know what it is. I never looked. But they have a different top body than males, and they've got something up there too. Well, this guy right here, the rising star of the Canadian military, he broke into 82 female dwellings and went over and took certain items of clothing, and he put them in his house, and then this thing that he was married to, and by the way, I think this is a sham marriage. It's called beard. When two homosexuals get married to each other, but they want to look normal for political reasons. So much for Russell Williams. He's in jail for life. Oh, wait a minute. I don't have notes. I don't speak from notes. Just to show you how critical timing is, while I was here last night, and if you need to advance that, go ahead, but I'm going to read you something that just came last night. If there's one person in here who wants me to prove it, I'll go down to my room if I can find my way. Here's what came to me last night, and this is the value, Ian, of these types of things, because when people from abroad, and I mean, you guys too, but when you guys come here, your friends and your network, they'll send you information that might be pertinent to our gathering. Listen to this. On the morning of February 3rd, 2010, Russell Williams placed the frozen, naked body of Jessica Lloyd in an RCAF issue large duffel bag and put her in the back of his Nissan Pathfinder. He hung the body in a tree just north of his cottage and then drove to Toronto to deliver 3 8-gigabyte Kingston brand thumb drives to Julian Fantino. Don't try to remember these names. Who delivered it to Stephen Harper, who is the homosexual Canadian premier, who passed it to David Johnston, who I think is called the Governor General of Canada, who used a courier to get it to the royals in the UK, where Prince Andrew kept it in his private collection. Prince Charles was to give, did I offend anyone? Good. I just got this last night, so pardon my reading it. Prince Charles was to give the command for Williams and Fantino to advance their roles in the criminal enterprise run by Charles and his mother. Video number 1 was the video of Russell raping and murdering RCAF Corporal Mary Frances Como. Williams is seen smiling and lifting his baklava. I didn't know what that was this morning, so I Googled it. It's a mask, full body mask, or full facial mask, to affirm his identity. In other words, while he's performing this assault on a female, he smiled at the camera. Bad move. Video 2 and 3 were the sadistic rapes and murder of Jessica Lloyd, both at her home and his cottage. She went in the freezer after that. Video 4 was the sadistic rape and torture and ritual sacrifice of Deborah Rashat by Williams and others. Now, this is where we get over to England. The Crown suppressed and lied about videos 3 and 4 as they were never shown in court. This is probably because the people from the Crown who joined Williams at the cottage for the ritual murders, torture, and sacrifices are seen on the videos. The license plates of the videos parked near Williams' cottage by the nights of the disappearance of the women and the roadblock at which they claim to have learned about Williams have been traced to the Canadian government and the OPP. Nobody here knows, including me, but it stands for Ontario Provincial Police, which worked with the Crown and Stephen Harper to cover up the rapes and murders of these young ladies, and I intend to have their ass. Williams' rape and torture of children was suppressed as part of a plea bargain with his partners, the Crown, because the evidence implicates all those who have received promotion since the event. Fantino, I'm just going to read the surnames. Fantino, Lewis, Hawks, Folks, Reeves, Nicholson. Detective Ben Beatty, however, the cop who delivered the most evidence to Able Danger, which is a group of private individuals who don't like this kind of stuff, was busted from 30-year detective to the rank of special constable, and now he sells real estate in Memora, Ontario to try and make ends meet and feed his alcohol addiction. So that's something that came in during your conference, Ian, so thanks for having the conference. What slide are we on? We can skip this one. The significance is the banks are not held accountable and 7,000 or 8,000 humans are. There's a little bit of an imbalance here. Pedophilia by its nature in modern societies is a secret fraternity. Well, it's not a secret anymore, is it? No, of course not. The Skull and Bones, that's Cecil Rhodes. He's one of yours. He went to Africa, and he liked little boys. But he didn't want to be bored with, I'm trying to think of a well, abusing a 10 or 14-year-old boy. He didn't want to be bored by having to abuse the same one twice. So when he got done, Cecil Rhodes, Rhodes Scholar, he'd get done with a little boy, he'd throw him off a cliff, kill him. And that's your Rhodes Scholar, and that's your Bill Clinton. Excuse me? Who? I wish I could speak English. It's such a beautiful language. But, you know, I speak whatever I speak, but it's not double speak, I'll tell you that. Skull and Bones, okay, that's George Bush, John F. Kerry, George Bush Sr., Cecil Rhodes. Secret opium smuggling is not a secret anymore. The UK and the US have been doing a lot of opium smuggling, and they're not fooling Americans, and I don't think they're fooling you guys, but, you know, maybe we can expose them. One of the people in my country that they killed because he was going to expose the opium was a guy named Pat Tillman, who was an American football player. He was assassinated by, well, the rifle used was a British rifle, a bullpup, SA-80, I think. Doesn't matter. That doesn't say it was a UK guy from SAS pulling the trigger. It could have been a CIA guy from the US pulling the trigger trying to implicate the UK. Because all these people point the finger at everybody but themselves. Well, I'm pointing the finger at them. Exposure of elite pedophiles. Okay, what's elite? Elite are the people that come from certain bloodlines that think they can make rules for all of us, but they don't have to live by them. They call that elite. I call it bull excrement. Okay, and then elite pedophiles, lesbian, gay, transvestite, bisexual. In other words, anybody who's not a heterosexual, you know, they don't like heterosexuals because we reproduce people, where if we heterosexuals wouldn't reproduce so many, I had 5, oh, then they could bring in more immigrants from wherever who are easily handled. Well, handle this. Poor Ian. He tried to handle me, and it's working so far. We're on schedule. Paperclip. That is when Nazis, see, people think that the Allies won World War II. Well, maybe. It depends on who's keeping score. But the Nazis didn't lose it. At the end of World War II, the Nazis went to a couple destinations, the United States and Russia. Am I right? Well, whatever he says, I agree to, because we don't have time to argue. But, you know, our country right now is run by Nazis, and they can call themselves anything they want, but they're not. They're just carryovers from World War II. And I can speak for the millions of people, especially the Russian people, who were slaughtered so they couldn't reproduce. They slaughtered Russians, they slaughtered Germans, they slaughtered Brits, they slaughtered Canadians, they slaughtered Americans. And these guys, and they were mostly guys back then, they were taken in their youth before the reproductive cycle. And that's social engineering of the most evil kind. Thanks for agreeing, Ian. This guy, I don't know why you guys put up with this, but then we all know this guy, and I don't know why the rest of the people in the UK don't find out who he was supplying kids to and work up the food chain and get rid of all of them.
Mrs. Thatcher as well.
Statute?
Mrs. Thatcher.
Oh, yeah, I know. I don't want to get into that because then we'd end up in Peladaba where her son, Mark, I think it was, he went down there with Cameron, Zuma, and Obama, got nuclear weapons out of South Africa, except they were supposed to send them to Haifa, Israel. Half of them ended up in Chicago. And I have great fun reminding the FBI and the White House and the military that you haven't found those Peladaba nukes yet. And, you know, they can use those as a threat all the time. Back on schedule, here we go. Pedophiles, perverts, psychopaths, and pirates. I would have something to say here, except for I'm polite. May have extended civilization, colonization of Holy Roman. Okay, the Jesuits control 60% of America. The Brits, and I'm talking about the bad ones, not you people, the crown agents of the crown, they control 40% of America, but America controls none of America. And to me, if I had a bullshit flag, I'd be waving it right now. We've had enough of the Jesuits. We've had enough of the British control of the United States of America. We should become a beacon of hope, because I think most people that came here today know something's terribly wrong, and they were hoping they would hear something that would make them feel better. Well, I hope you will say when you're done tomorrow that you've heard something that makes you feel a little bit better. We could all use it. To do Roman guys. Okay, here we got there's a bunch of people that are alleged pedophiles. What you might have seen that I don't have time to go back, and I wouldn't go back if I could, but 2 of those pedophiles are princes, and it says allegedly in both cases. Well, that's not anything to be proud of. I hate to talk about this. See this buffoon? That's my sister. My sister handled him. My sister handled Hillary Rodham Clinton. Back in your sailing days, I guess the sailors got sort of tired of being alone. And so they had these guys, just read it for yourself. I'm not going to say anus, but they had to sit on a peg. They'd sit there, and then when some lonely sailor came along, they'd say, stand up, it's your turn. And then something would happen, and then the little boy would sit back on his peg. I understand. In fact, I hope Brian Garish is here, because he was at sea for 16 years, give or take, and I've been to sea too, and I was only at sea for weeks at a time, never 6 months like the standard tour, but I don't care how much you miss the company of someone of the opposite gender. This isn't right. It's never right. It wasn't right back in the 1700s. It's not right to now, so let's get over it. And this guy, he's sort of vanished from the face of the earth, but what's vanished faster was his 2 kids that he's not related to by DNA, because they were both, there's no relationship between and the 2 little girls. And I don't think there's any relationship to whatever was bonded or bearded to him and the 2 little girls. And the little girl's father, who was I don't like these terms, but a semen donor. He's come up and he said, wait a minute, those are my daughters. And he's identified the mothers, who went and bought some goo. So this is all very sickening. And I apologize to anybody who's being offended by this, but if your universities and your governments aren't going to teach you the truth, you might have to come to AV9 for another dose. Ann, how are we doing? My favorite 3. There, that'll offend you, and so I won't say it. But these people were all working for the Queen. And this one's a homosexual. This one's a homosexual. I don't know, and if I did know, I'd say it, but I don't know. But there's something not quite right about that guy. And it goes back to the 1860s. Anybody heard of the Great Chicago Fire of 1871? Yeah. There you go. Ewan Cameron. He had the insurance on that morning of October 8th of 1871. 13,300 of the 13,600 structures that were occupied by German people who were very good engineers and could create industry, they burned to the ground. And this guy's great-grandfather had a big part in that. And the insurance documents and the incendiary instructions went to a safe in Scotland. And I think that guy that I don't like, what's his name? Anyway, I think he's from Scotland. And I could be wrong, but I don't think so. What'd she say?
The guy in the middle of the 3.
Which guy? I didn't see it.
In that picture.
Anybody know who the guy in the middle was?
Stephen Harper, the Canadian Prime Minister. Stephen
Did you?
Stephen Harper.
We'll find out, and you guys can find me. Ann, can you remember to tell me what I just didn't see? Thank you. Ancient noble lies. Okay, with the noble lie, has anybody heard that expression, the noble lie? Okay, the noble lie is that there's some bloodlines that are more important than others, and those bloodlines should run the world because we're not good enough to run the world because we're not of noble bloodlines. Well, if David Cameron, Barack Obama, Stephen Harper, George H.W. Bush, Bill Clinton, it's so good when I forget these creeps. But if those guys, if they're noble or they're elite, I don't want to be noble or elite. I just rather love my neighbor as myself and be kind to people and make sure that children don't get abused, by monsters. And that's what we're talking about here. That's a monster. That could be a monster. Anybody recognize Bill Maloney? Yeah, he's written, he has Pie and Mash Films, and his family, I think he had not a daughter, a sister named Diana, D-Y-A-N-A, who probably was murdered 20 years ago, but she died under unsolved circumstances because when the elites do it to the common people, it doesn't get solved. And so his sister got killed a long time ago. He was in this care home, and I call them don't care homes. But you know, Ed Heath hasn't been talked about yet in this speech. This is not a speech, this is a ramble. But that's an island. That's the name of the island. And Morning Cloud used to go on little day trips over to that island, pick up 3 or 4 boys. Sometimes they'd drop them off, sometimes they wouldn't be seen again. And that's your Ed Heath. And then I love reading in history books, and he was never married. No kidding. I mean, why get married when you can go out and get 3 or 4 boys every weekend on your boat? And the boat was the Morning Cloud, and it got destroyed on September 4th of a certain year. Could be 73, could be 74, doesn't matter. It was destroyed in what is called a natural event, weather. Well, who controls the weather? It used to be somebody else. Now it's HARP and a bunch of criminals in the UK, the US, and other criminal countries. Global open source investigation, we're one of them. Another one right now in the United States that's going after pedophiles, Craig Sawyer, I think is his name, and they have a bunch of special forces military guys who once they wake up and figure out what they were really doing, they resent that they were very skilled killers, but they were working for the bad people. And it's really hard to de-train yourself. Once you've been educated that you're special and your job is to go around and kill the enemies of your country, when you figure out that the people you're killing are not the enemies of your country, and then you go back to figure out, well, who told me to go kill that guy? And you look at your senior officers. I could rattle some off. In fact, I just might. Cody, Abazad, Dempsey, Petraeus, McChrystal, Kinzinger, and Pharisee. Those are the generals that covered up Pat Tillman's assassination. I'm going to give you now the people who caused Extortion 17 to be taken down. Once again, a bunch of pedophile weirdos. You'll recognize some of these names. Obama, he's in the chain of command. Extortion 17, they killed 38 men and a dog in Wardak province of Afghanistan on the 6th of August of 2011. So 38 men and a dog just to cover up the fact that the U.S. military never got bin Laden because bin Laden was dead before they went to get him. And I was actually in England with you, Ian, at Edge TV when that slob from Punahou was taking credit for getting Osama bin Laden, and I knew, and they were trying to disrupt the royal wedding. I think is the reason they had they wanted to they didn't want the world's media to be looking at your royal wedding, so they went out and pretended like they got Osama bin Laden, which they did not. Corey Feldman, Hollywood actor, he says that I can tell you that the #1 problem in Hollywood was and still is and always will be pedophilia. Who can argue that? Look, I'm ahead because she didn't give me a new slide. That one, we got one. Pedophilia is the cancer at the core of all that is wrong in the world today. There are none so blind as those who will not see. This is one of my absolute favorite targets, and I do believe, and I'm speaking for a group of people that includes many Brits, people from around the world that are fed up with the abuse of our oppressive governments on little people. And I don't mean just young people. Most of you in this room are little people. You're not thought of as your government as being essential or even worthy. They just think that you're fodder to run through their lack of leadership, and they want you dead, which brings us back to NHS and who interrupted or who hacked your NHS system. I think if you go back and study this name, Maureen Baginski, B-A-G-I-N-S-K-I, you might find out who goofed up your NHS. She's a former NSA person. She works for Serco. She's an American, and she's not your friend. Okay, the Clinton Foundation needs you to keep your eyes wide shut. This right here, it says, don't shoot the messenger. There's a commercial artist in the United States of America who's about 70 years old who's very, very good at making images. And who would like to see her violated or him violated? Not anyone in this room, but if anybody would, please raise your hand. Nice crowd. Drug slaves and sex slaves built the richest family dynasties in history to bail out bankrupt England and bankrupt the British Empire. Oh, good, Brits and Americans. We're in this together because, well, we're in it together right now, but I can't I'm not anywhere interested in politics or global politics, but I think the UK and Israel better watch out for Russia, China, and the US, because I think at the highest levels of China, Russia, and the US, they're saying this British-Israel thing isn't working. And if you go back in history between World War I and World War II, you will see that the US military, I think back then it was called the Department of War. Well, that's what it is today. But see, we hide behind Department of Defense. Why are we in someone else's country defending ourselves? I'm fed up with it. I was in the military 26 years, and I was naive as a schoolgirl. My parents spent, between my mother and my father, they were both in the military. And I see it's almost time. This is Brothers in Arms. Dire Straits had a great song called Brothers in Arms. You're my brother. It doesn't matter what nation we're from. That guy's me. That guy is a brilliant guy who you can see he's anonymous. But these license plates, it says Tillman's Ghost, because we actually exposed who killed Tillman, and it was the United States. And I got a call from Pat Tillman's mother, and it was one of the hardest calls I've ever taken, because she was either going to really love me or really hate me. But I took it like a man once. I'm not good at this. I'm a procrastinator. I called her and I said, "Yes, ma'am, are you upset or happy?" She was profusely happy that someone was keeping the truth of her son's assassination by the United States military alive. There's a guy from Wales. Now, we're told by your MI6, or is it MI5? But I think it's MI6. He worked for MI6. He's a brilliant mathematician, and he broke the code on some transgressions by the Obama administration, the Clintons, all those groups in America that I so like to talk about, like G.H.W. Bush. And he broke it, and so they had to kill him. But when they killed him, they tried to convince all you guys and all of us in America that he could put himself in a hold-all bag, he could zip it shut, and he could lock it from the inside. Does anybody in this room believe that? Then I think it's time to surrender my pointer and thank Ian R. Crane. And I have... And my sister and Hillary did Pizzagate. Pizzagate only means the network of pedophilia in America, whereas Pedogate means the network of pedophilia around the world, which my sister and Hillary Clinton also are key players in.
You might cover the Podesta brothers and all that stuff.
Well, the Podesta brothers, they're linked to Maddie McCann, and the Podesta brothers have gone on record as saying that they would be more than happy to assassinate people that expose them. Okay, Mr. Podesta, my name's Field McConnell. Come and get it. I'd like to give you your belt. See, I tricked him into calling me back because I only gave him the buckle last year. Listen, thank you very much. I appreciate it.